We are joined by a very special guest, Jools Watsham. What's up, man?
Hello. How's it going, guys?
Hey, Jools, if you're unfamiliar with him, is basically the co-founder of independent developer, Renegade Kidd. Is that correct, or are you just the founder?
Yep, that's correct.
Okay.
And how many kids are there?
Officially, just two, I guess.
All right, there you go.
My business partner is Greg Hargrove, longtime friend, and we're the co-founders of Renegade Kidd.
And
Cool.
if you're watching the video version of NVC, we're staring to the bottom down there and seeing Jools there, but he's also floating behind us. So.
Yes, absolutely. So,
See it all.
Renegade Kidd recently put out Mutant Mudds Super Challenge, which you can get on 3DS or Wii U. It's available now, cross-buy supported. So if you buy it on one platform, Jools, you're getting it on both. Is that correct?
That's right, yeah.
You guys also did some really special promotions with this thing. Can you talk a little bit about sort of working this out with Nintendo?
Yeah, we did a bunch. Yeah, we did the cross-buy, which is not the first, but one of the first. And it's not a very common thing on the Nintendo platforms. We did a loyalty discount and an Indies at Home thing. And the reason I mention them both at the same time is they kind of offer the same discount, where, like, if you remember E3 last year, where there was a demo you could download, which is pretty neat. I don't know if Nintendo are going to do it again this year, but it was really cool they did this last year, where there was like 9 demos you could download on the Wii U eShop. And there were also games that were at E3. So kind of like at home, you could kind of...
Yeah, Nindies at home. That was it.
Yeah, exactly. Everyone at E3. Anyway, so if you downloaded that demo, or if you bought the original Mudds, you get a 15% loyalty discount, which is good until April 16th. And then, in addition to that, you get the cross-buy as well. So it's, we just, I don't know, as that market's kind of coming to the end of its era, we felt like it's a good idea to put some incentives out there to try and not only entice people, but also try and get above the noise of Nintendo's first-party stuff, just somehow give us some kind of reason to be seen.
And was that tough to push through? I mean, the platform, Nintendo's shop is not set up for cross-buy the way, the Vita and the PlayStation are linked, for example. Like, how does it take convincing, or is that something that's easily done?
No, it was easy. We just asked them, and they said, yeah, sure, fill out this paperwork. And that was it. And we also did, Europe and North America at the same time, which was the first time we had done that. So, just a bunch more paperwork, I guess, to do. But no, it wasn't that hard. So no, anyone can do it. There's no, there's not really any barriers you have to work through to get that set up.
So it's unfortunate we didn't have you on the show when Brian and I were first playing Mutant Mudds, because we had some choice words for you back then.
I missed that. Oh man.
No, that game was really. I played the original, finished it, did everything there was to do, and I played it on 3DS.
I think
originally.
I played it on everything.
Yeah,
I think I even played it on Vita and pretty much everywhere it went.
Nice. You went back. You're like a glutton for punishment.
Yes.
Then,
yeah.
Did you even check it out on the iPhone? It's even on there as well.
I did. Yeah.
No, I didn't actually. I was like, I was so conditioned with playing it with the D-pad. And
understandable, definitely.
Although I actually do play a decent amount of platforming games on iOS, a lot of them feel kind of slower paced, and I was like, with this one, this is so Twitch based that I need something precise for this.
That's that's why I downloaded it on iPhone. I wanted to see how you pulled off the controls without the D-pad, because I felt, I mean, your game, for those who haven't played it, it's difficult, right?
Yeah.
They're very, very close jumps you have to make to avoid death by spike, for example.
Yeah.
And the D-pad is beautiful for that, and it works well on the 3DS, but it's still very demanding when it comes to timing. And so I was really curious to hear from you. How did you approach even bringing it to a device that doesn't have buttons and a D-pad?
Yeah, I mean, we were definitely hesitant. Our first, for us, we had to prove it to ourselves that it was worth it. I mean, there's 40 levels in there, well, 80 with all the things we added later, and we're like, well, if we can't get the core player package down, it's going to be 80 levels of suck. It's just like, it's pointless. It doesn't matter. So that was the first thing we did. Matthew, who's the programmer on all of our 2D stuff, and really a designer in his own right, he's very hardcore platformer D-pad fan. So he was like, yeah, we have to get this right, or we're just not doing it. And I'm like, yep, I totally agree. So I just played a bunch of games and trying to get a feel for which ones are doing it right, which ones are doing it wrong, and what can we take from that. And some of them are doing a pretty good job, and I think we found, just trying to look at how people naturally move their thumbs around on the screen, and what might work. And we just kind of played around with a few different setups, and we got one that I feel works pretty good. I mean, it's never going to feel as good as the 3DS or any D-pad. It's just a fact. It's just no way, because you don't have that physical feedback where you don't have to look down. You know, you have to look down sometimes to go, is my thumb in the right place? Yes, it is. Okay, cool. But I think we pulled it off pretty good. I mean, you tell me if you've checked it out. I think it worked out pretty good.
It worked well. Did you have to relax some of the difficulty, like some of the challenges?
No,
did you have to change
no, it's
them?
the exact same game.
One for one.
We didn't make any changes.
Wow, that's amazing.
And I've played through the whole thing, you know, so just to make sure, you know, if it was going to be horrible, I lived through that horribleness myself. And I enjoyed it. You know, it's not as good as the 3DS version, for sure. But I played through the whole game. I didn't destroy my phone at the end of it. I was like, yeah, this feels pretty good. For that market, I think it's one of the best 2D platforms you can get. Of course, I'm biased. I would say that, but I really believe that.
So then tell me what made you want to go back for Super Challenge, right? Like you've done Mutant Mudds, and I feel like it's also the game, and pardon me if I'm wrong, but you've been able to get it on a lot of platforms. I feel like you got it onto PC, you were able to get it onto the PlayStation Store as well. So what was the approach for Super Challenge for you?
We'd been kicking around the idea for Mudds 2 for a while, and that is a much larger scope concept. So Super Challenge is not that. Super Challenge isn't a sequel. It's a continuation of the first game. And for us, you know, because of the market and how things are going, and obviously the NX is on the horizon, and just a sense of timing, we're like, well, Mudds 2 wouldn't fit in that time slot. So we're like, well, let's do something else with Mudds, you know, because we love Mudds. Let's do some more with that. And we're big fans of like the Lost Levels. We liked that being the sequel to Mario Brothers, even though in Nintendo of America weren't they didn't support the idea of that being the sequel to Mario Brothers, even though Japan did.
Yeah,
I like that idea.
That's a tough game.
Yeah,
it is a tough game, but I like the concept of if you play the first game and you love it, you know, you just want more. You don't want necessarily have it be reinvented with this added and that changed and this taken away. You're like, I just want that, but more, please. That'd be great. And that's not done very often. And I like that with Lost Levels. And I'm like, that'd be really cool if we could do that. So that was the initial kind of concept. And then over time, we're like, we just kept on adding to it. You know, we made all the level themes completely different. You know, we added 5 bosses. And different gameplay things in the levels themselves, with the hidden pathways, the collectible, you know, CDs, the secret characters. You know, we kept on adding more and more to make it appealing. So it's kind of somewhere in between a sequel and a mission pack. You know, it's definitely more than a mission pack, but it's not quite a sequel. So it's somewhere in the middle of there. So it was fun, really fun to kind of come to it in that way. Like I approached it as if the player had just finished the first game and now they're jumping right into this game. So I'm not going to hold their hand in any way. I'm not even going to tell them how to play the first game. If you don't know how to play it, boom, let's go. And that was nice.
I did get some like very serious sort of like Legend of Zelda Second Quest type of vibes from it. You know, of sort of being like, well, a lot of this is familiar, but it's also really difficult, and I don't know if I'm as good as I was the first time around, but I want to dig in more. Right. I was very interested in that, and actually, like, really just from a gameplay perspective, really enjoyed the way that Mutant Mudds is like a platforming game that's really less about landing the jump as much as it is about making the jump itself. Yeah. Like you have that kind of throttle that you're holding that changes the timing incredibly, and it took me a little while to get used to, but I think once it clicks with people, they really understand what it's going for. It's very smart in that regard.
Yeah, the other element I really liked when I first played it on the 3DS was, was the 3D feature was really well done. You know, you actually jump into the back of a level and you get the distance. Remember that? Like when we all still had our 3D slider turned up, right?
Yeah. Right. Did it before Kirby. I mean, Mutant Mudds did it before Kirby Triple Deluxe tried that same idea. Yep. Yeah.
I remember when we did it. I mean, obviously it's stolen from Wario Land from the Virtual Boy. Yep. But that was all red, and great game, loved it. But we liked that idea. The 3DS was come along. We're like, great, let's take that idea and see what we can do with it. We added an extra dimension into the foreground, and obviously it's full color, so that's a bit more pleasing on the eyes. And I remember the first time we had it just working in the game. We jumped in the background, and I was like, oh man, that is that's sweet. Because the 3D was so solid. I mean, it's even more solid now in the new 3DS, but even then it was pretty good if you found the sweet spot. And it was like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. Jumping into the background, I was like, I just kept on doing it. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. And I think 2D games done in 3D have almost a more profound effect on you because you could really judge, I'm here, now I'm there. There's not much granularity. There's no gradient. It's like black and white. I'm here or I'm there. And it really, you get that great sense of those three shifts, whereas like 3D Land, which I love, Mario 3D Land's an excellent game. After a while, the 3D effect almost wears off. Like you don't even realize it's there anymore because it's so gradiated and granulated. You kind of get used to it. And it just looks like reality in a way. So your brain kind of just almost switches off. Whereas 2D, it's just very, more in your face, abrupt, which is kind of fun.
Now, you mentioned Wario for Virtual Boy. I could have sworn I saw you made a mock-up of what that game would look like in full color.
Yeah,
that was you, right?
Yeah.
So what happened with that? Was
Nintendo interested in that? It didn't work.
Well, yeah, I mean, like, because that's like that Wario game for Virtual Boy is widely regarded as the best game in that system.
It's so good.
And Nintendo's never really done anything to. It's totally forgotten. They've never done anything for all the amount of times they've re-released almost every Mario game. That's the one that's just kind of left behind. That and Mario Clash were the two big first-party games.
Any game on that platform isn't going to see the light of day for a while, I feel.
So did you pitch your mock-up to Nintendo?
I did, actually, yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, because it's like, we were like, hey, we could provide the service of bringing all of the Virtual Boy stuff over to the 3DS if you want.
Wow.
Because once we do one, we could do all of them.
Right.
Okay.
And
even Waterworld?
I guess NCL are just not, I don't know, it's almost... this is my opinion. It almost seems like it's an embarrassment. They're sweeping under the rug and they're moving on. That didn't happen. Let's ignore that and move forward. They haven't said that to me, but that's kind of the sense I get. Like they just don't want to touch it.
It's odd though because I feel like they've oddly embraced the Virtual Boy in weird times. Like there were some jokes in Tamagotchi Life about it. I think there's one in Smash Brothers. Like it's showed up in some of their more.
Well, even Reggie was like playing. Remember he was training for something, and he was even playing the Virtual Boy.
That's exactly it. Like I feel like it showed up in some of their more like archival museum throwback stuff that they sneak into games.
Yeah. But I think they have to still pass that threshold where like the Power Glove, it becomes funny and cool to talk about it, right? Like I would love to see them go back to that. But yeah, obviously it didn't sound like they were into that. But let's not forget, Game & Watch they ignored for a very, very long time. Right. And now you have, a character in Smash Brothers. You had a special re-release for
they had
Club
collections
Nintendo.
They put out a couple of times. Either
I think
on
Game Boy Color.
Game Boy Color, Game Boy Advance. I think I know on DS it was also like a Club Nintendo reward. There was a version you can get.
But
think of the box.
Think of the original monochrome Game Boy, right? And like it could have easily made the jump to the old Game Boy devices, and they never went to that. So
well, they did do with like Virtual Console stuff. You can hold the buttons down and start it off with the Game Boy border around it, the original Game Boy. So, Jools, did you take this pitch to them? They said no. Did you say at all like, well, I mean, while we're here, I could also do a Wario game for you guys from the ground up?
They didn't officially say no.
Okay.
I just didn't hear from them again.
Right.
Oh, got it. It's unfortunate.
So,
Because
technically, I guess it could still happen.
I feel like you making a Wario game from the ground up is like kind of a perfect fit.
Like you were saying, Brian, like Wario Land, hands down, is the best game on the Virtual Boy. I mean, I don't think anyone. Well, maybe someone will argue with that, but generally, I think people were like, "Yeah, that was the game."
Yeah.
And even within the Wario history, it's a great game. It's even compared because Wario is their quirky game, right? So some of them are like, yeah, that was great that you tried that, but yeah, it didn't really work. There's a lot of those Wario games. Are like, yeah, it's a bit weird. But there's games like Shake It. I think it was on the Wii, which is pretty fantastic. Yeah. There's the GBA one, Wario Land 4 or whatever it was, 3 maybe. The Game Boy Color ones are pretty good, and the Virtual Boy one's right up there with them. It's a great journey going through that game, and the way they use the 3D was very clever, very smart. We totally leveraged that. We're like, that was really smart. Let's borrow that idea. It's very clever.
Nice.
It's a great game in its own right. I'd love to see either just the Virtual Boy Red version or a fully colored version on the 3DS would be awesome. Would be huge.
Make it happen.
So then, speaking of journeys, I'd love to hear a little bit more about you. More specifically, just like what made you want to get into making games?
I guess when I look back, I kind of always did. When I was a kid, the first computer we got was one my dad brought home as a Spectrum 48K rubber keyboard. At the time it was awesome, cutting edge stuff,
Yep.
But now it literally has 48K of memory, which is, you can't even get a JPEG in that. I mean, that's just silly. But it was awesome. That's what we brought home. Eventually I got my own version of that, the Spectrum Plus, that had the hard keyboards and stuff. And I just, we had the magazines where you type in the program and, from the magazine, and then obviously it wouldn't run.
Wrong,
you have to fix it and debug it and actually get it to run properly and all that fun stuff. And so that's kind of where it began. So I guess I have to blame my dad for that. And I've always loved games, but I also found I wasn't satisfied with just playing the games. I'd always try and get my hands on a game making package, like on the Commodore 64 and the Amiga and the ST. There was a program called Shoot 'em Up Construction Kit, or SEOC. Made by the Sensible Software guys who did Sensible Soccer and Cannon Fodder and all that kind of great stuff. It was horrible, but it was awesome. I mean, for me, I could make my own sprites, and you can set the scroll speed and do your little, spaceship and shoot things, or make him a cowboy shooting guys, or whatever. You can make him whatever. I love that. So I was always making games, and I didn't even realize it. I was just so interested in getting in there. But the weird thing is, I never really allow myself to believe I could really ever make games and get paid to do it. They come from some magic factory somewhere by very smart people. That won't be me. I won't be doing that. I'll be doing something else instead. Thankfully I did get into it through the journalist route. Funnily enough,
wow.
I applied for. I'll do the short version of this story, but I basically was in London and in Farringdon. And EMAP Images, the building is there. I was going to college there at the time. And I came across it, and I was like, wow, whoa, that's where The One is made. And that was a magazine that I would read, an Amiga magazine. I actually had it on me at the time. And it was a nice junction for me where I was like, do I go in and ask for a job, or do I just walk by going, oh, that was cool? Cut a long story short, I went in, asked for a job, and eventually got it. I was like 17 at the time, and I was basically cheap and enthusiastic. That's why I got the job. My writing skills were terrible. But they're like, whatever, if we can get someone to, because at the time the screenshots, they would take photos of the TV screen in a dark room, go and get them processed, slap them to the thingamajig, to the printers, and get them in there. So my first job was organizing that. They had hundreds of these negatives, not organized at all. That was my job, is to organize these negatives into folders. So they actually said, oh, there's that game. Great, we've got the screenshots here. And so that's kind of how I started.
Welcome to the video game industry.
Yeah, exactly.
But how do you
now go and organize this stuff?
Yeah.
Thanks.
But how do you take the step from that to coding? You code too, right?
I don't code.
You
No,
don't
I never,
code. Okay, so
I attempted to learn it once, and I was like, whoa, no way.
But you handle design then?
I do design, arts, and everything else, basically. Everything but code, essentially. I do music, obviously PR, business, blah. Pretty much everything but code, I guess.
That's unusual, though, right? Because I think a lot of indie devs start with coding and then learn more about design. Like, it's unusual to hear from someone who said, I'm going to be a designer, and can actually kind of will that career path into existence.
I actually started as an artist because when I started, game designers didn't exist. That wasn't a role that had been defined at that time. It didn't exist in the consciousness. There were artists and there were programmers, and design was just something that happened. So I would do pixel art, and I applied for a job and made some contacts while I was working at the magazine. And I got my first job as a pixel artist on SNES, Genesis kind of games. And I remember one of the first projects I worked on was me and a programmer making a Contra ripoff for the Super Nintendo. It was like two guys trying to rip off Contra 3, which was an incredible, exceptional game, trying to rip that off and make a project. And the result of that was a game called Time Slip, which isn't awful, but it's not great either.
So it shipped.
Right.
Okay. So
Yeah.
wait, what is, just out of curiosity, do you have a maybe top three, or if not just one, your favorite Super Nintendo game?
It'd have to be Super Mario World.
Yeah?
It'd have to be, yeah. Such a special. I remember when I first saw that, it was a Japanese import. And at the time I was into the Amiga and the ST and stuff like that. And when I saw that, I was like, what is that? I mean, it looks and sounds and feels alien, but awesome to me. I've never seen, heard, or played anything like that. I was like, what is this? It was really amazing. So yeah, that has to be my favorite. It's such a great game.
Yeah. It's really funny if you when you wind back the clock and you look at the games that we played when we were kids in Europe, from Commodore 64 to Amiga and Atari ST.
Yeah.
The music sounded completely different, right?
Oh,
it was that
totally.
kind of that Euro pop synth music, and then Super Mario World just sounded completely different, sound-wise and composition-wise.
But man, that Commodore could put out some sound.
Oh my gosh,
some of the best stuff I've
Sid
ever
was
heard.
great. Yes.
Yeah. It was very, very good. Okay, Jools, so then what made you go independent, out of curiosity?
So I was working at Acclaim for a long time, so that would do it to you. But that was a great place. I got to meet some really good people, made some great friends, and learn what to do and what not to do there, and it was a good time. But they eventually closed their doors in 2004. So I worked at a few different places, and then eventually actually had a pretty good job. Both Greg and I worked at the same place, but then we decided, look, we just need to stop working for other people and just make our own stuff. That's what I really wanted to do. So we just decided to leave, a pretty good paying, safe job, go, wow, all right, let's just try and do this independent thing and see what happens. And that was, I guess we decided that almost 10 years ago. It was 2006 is kind of technically when we decided to do that. And then our first game, we released Dementium in 2007, Halloween 2007.
And then what games did you work on at Acclaim? What were the biggest projects you worked on?
Iggy's Wrecking Balls was actually that's probably when I came to IGN to hang out with you, right?
I think that's when we met, because first of all we thought you guys were making it up and that wasn't a real game.
Right, exactly. So that's the one that's closest to me, because it was my first project. Well, I was project manager, and at the time that meant someone who's a producer and a designer under one role, because Acclaim didn't want to pay two people to do that job.
Oh wow.
So that was my job on that game. And Greg, actually, my business partner now, was the lead artist on that project. So we were working together at that time. And so that was a fun project, but not really a great game, but it was a fun project to do. But I guess one of the biggest ones is probably Turok 2. I did some of the multiplayer maps for that. Okay. Helped with some NBA Jam games back in the 2D times. Yep. Aero the Acrobat, again, another 2D stuff.
I like
and Zero
that
the
game.
Kamikaze Squirrel. I was the lead artist on that. So games like that.
The Zero and Aero are better games than people remember them as.
Yeah, I think a lot of people stored them with the entire wave of character mascot games that came out in the 90s.
Like Bubsy.
Yeah, definitely way better than Bubsy.
Yeah.
Bubsy is not a good game.
Oh my gosh.
Someone needs to bring back Croc. No.
Do they?
No. Not really. Okay, so then you put out Dementium, you put out Moon, but curiously enough, you chose the Nintendo DS as the platform. So what sort of made you guys do that? Just out of curiosity, because these were much more mature titles, I think, than what you expected on a Nintendo platform.
Yeah, there were like 5 first-person DS games, and you guys made 2 of them.
3 of them.
Three of them. Yeah.
There we go.
I guess it just made sense in some weird way at the time. I was a huge fan of the DS. For me, I've always loved portables. I loved the Game Boy Color, GBA. When the GBA SP came out, I was like, that's perfection. It has the whole laptop design going on, and wow, and it has the bright screen, the second version of those SPs. So I still have that, love that thing. And then the DS came out, which was kind of a brick, but it was awesome, but it was like pretty ugly. I'm like, still like the SP, but the DS is pretty cool. And then the DS Lite finally came out. All right, now we're talking.
Now we're talking.
Now we've got some design going on. So I just loved, like I said, I just loved them. So, we'd had some experience with the N64 with Turok and games like that. And the hardware capabilities are similar, N64 and DS. Different hardware completely, but the capabilities are similar. So we're like, you know what? It would be cool. Like we want to kind of make a splash with our first game. We're called Renegade Kidd. We have a skull and crossbones in our logo. So let's do something with a bit more balls to it. So we're like, great. We love survival horror. We love Silent Hill. We love Resident Evil. We know we can do something fairly decent in that genre as an FPS on the DS. No one else is doing it. So it'll either be a spectacular failure or maybe it'll do pretty good. So at least we'll get noticed anyway, at very least. So that was really the idea. And it paid off. It worked. We found a publisher in Gamecock, despite their silly name. Awesome people. They're still rocking it now as Devolver Digital. Great guys, good friends. They're in Austin, same as us. Okay. And they really contributed, I think, to the attitude of that game in their marketing and so on. So it was a really amazing, fortunate way to, I think, make our start in the industry as an independent developer.
Interesting. I always thought you guys looked at the platform and you thought, nobody's going to try to make first-person shooters. Nobody's making mature games, so our games will stand out on that platform. But did you also look at the platform and thought, it's going to be tough to make a 3D game that's going to run smoothly and control well because you did not have, a second stick to look around in the environment. Right.
Well, Metroid Hunters, the demo, had already been released. Uh-huh. So that proved the gameplay concept to us. Like, it can work. If this feels pretty good, it's going to be more niche. Not everyone's going to like it. But if Nintendo's doing it, that's good enough for us, Mm-hmm. So that helped. And actually we spoke with a couple of people as far as programming, as far as the engine and how we're going to create this thing. And the first team I spoke to had a different way of creating it. It was a bit more kind of Doom-like, where it was kind of more generated rather than actual models and meshes kind of living in the scene. But then the guy we ended up going with, who we're still working with today, Bob Ives, single-handedly created the engine, the plugins for Macs, all of the tools. One guy did all of the programming for Dementium. Incredible. So testament to him. And the game ran at 60 frames a second, had the flashlight effects. I mean, it was, at the time, it was like, wow, really, really incredible. And actually, one of the nice things about the DS is it has a cap of 2,000 polygons. So it doesn't really matter what you do, it will display those 2,000 polygons. You can't. It's kind of nice in that way. Whereas floating point stuff like 3DS and other machines like that, it's a bit more complicated than that. There's 1,000 factors that go into how many polygons you can display. Whereas the DS was like, boom, here you go, here's your 2,000, have fun. And that was kind of nice. It's kind of a thing that we could really leverage and go, great, we know our budget, let's go.
So you don't have to optimize a lot and like reduce geometry in order to avoid pop-up. Like you know exactly what you're working with.
Yeah.
From the
so we just budgeted this many for an enemy, this many for a level, and we can just and we just stuck to that. And funnily enough, actually, it ended up being a lot more powerful than we thought, and we actually added a lot more polys and textures for Dementium 2, because we were being way more conservative than we needed to be on Dementium 1.
Wow, that's really interesting.
So how did Crash Landed happen? For those at home, Crash Landed is basically if you could explain for them.
It's a 3D platformer. I mean, it was we were chatting with Activision. There was a console team that were developing Crash Landed, like the next gen version, which I think at the time was probably his PS2-ish era. Mm-hmm. And they're like, hey, we pitched in for the DS version. So we spent a lot of time, well, not a lot of time, actually, that's not fair, a few weeks. But we put a lot of effort into those few weeks in creating the character, creating the world, the camera, and all of the finesse to get in there. So I thought it turned out great. But
it looked really good. I've seen video of it, and I've always gone like, man, that looks like it could have worked out really well, but...
Yeah. Well, in the end, I think Activision ended up going with a different team, and that team also had experience with like racing game or another genre. So they had bigger plans for that brand. So they wanted to have a team that could handle all of those. So I think that was a big part of their decision making. But obviously, the whole project was canned anyway and never saw the light of day. So I think we've dodged a lot of bullets over the years. There's a lot of things we could have potentially got, but it fell through for whatever reason, and we ended up doing our own thing later. And that project that we didn't get ended up failing, or didn't even see the light of day. So, and that's always difficult for us who rely on the money from a publisher to make the game. If it suddenly stops, we're like, well, we still have next month to pay everyone. So what are we going to do? So we dodged a few bullets, I think, with that, and that's one of them we dodged.
And is the market for downloadable DS games, 3DS games, is the market big enough? I mean, obviously you've tried this now for a few years. Do you see it growing? Are more Nintendo fans now downloading games and trying out some of these indie titles as well?
I think it's He's got to a decent level. I don't know if it's growing anymore or if it's staying the same or maybe in slightly declining. It's certainly not. I don't think it's going to get any bigger at this point. I think it's met its max based on our own sales data anyway, which may or may not be a true reflection of it, because our games are very niche anyway. So there is that. But it's not a huge market, but it's an okay market because we're pretty tiny, we're pretty small, so it does pretty good for us. But obviously, based on the fact that we are releasing our games on other platforms, a lot of the reason for that is because we need to make more money to continue. Sure. So, we are finding that we are having to diversify a little bit as far as the number of platforms we release our stuff on.
And what's that experience been like for you, just in terms of diversifying? Like, is that a difficult thing to pull off, or do you feel comfortable now after having done it for a little bit?
Yeah, we've gone through a few growing pains, but now it's a little bit easier. I mean, or more manageable, I should say. We have our engine set up where it can handle that pretty well now, which is good. So it's becoming more and more of a necessity to put that in our plan from the beginning. But yeah, it's getting easier, which is good.
Yeah. I guess I also want to bring up, but I mean, I should have brought this earlier in full disclosure. You and Brian got to work together on a little game that you put out in 2014, which was Xeodrifter.
Right.
Yeah. And if you guys can just talk a little bit about that. First of all, Xeodrifter, more of a Metroid-like in some ways.
Yeah.
But
totally.
still very much, an action platformer, and a pretty good one.
Yeah, it's actually part of the reason, and this is probably something we're going to maybe bring up at some point anyway, but that Treasurnauts kind of ties into this a little bit. We announced Treasurnauts many, many years ago, and it still isn't out yet. And a lot of that is based on the scope of that game and in what time slot does that fit in versus, when do we need to release it and actually make money to earn money to make games and so on. That whole cycle, that lovely cycle that we're in. So Xeodrifter came from that, where we're like, yeah, we need to get something out at this time. We don't want to shrink Treasurnauts just to get it out, so let's do a smaller game. So Xeodrifter was born, which is a mini Metroid game, basically. Yeah, it's funny. I mean, we were, making the game, and I think almost casually, I'd like to hear your recollection of it, Brian. But also, almost casually on Twitter, we're like, hey, yeah, we're doing this game. And Brian's like, hey, I got a tune for that. I'm like, oh, let's check it out. Oh, that's awesome. We'll put it in. Cool, done. All right. We're done, really.
It was
awesome.
You either put out screenshots or a gameplay video, and I'm like, this is totally matching the aesthetic of this song I'm working on right now, which was like this weird sort of David Bowie Labyrinth inspired hybrid cover thing that was like,
right.
Yeah, it was like Wu-Tang David Bowie, and I'm like, I can do something with this. And I saw your screenshots, and I'm like, oh, we should match up on this. And I think I threw the song at you guys, and you're like, yeah, we'll see what we can do. And then you got back to me a little while later, and you're like, yeah, we're actually going to put it in the game. Yeah. And then I played through the whole game, and I'm like, the music's awesome in this game. Where's my song? Where's my song? Where's my song? And then I finished the game, and my song started playing. And it was really cool because I was both excited that I finished the game, because I get excited anytime I finish any game, but also that I was like, hey, this is the ending of the game, and they're playing my song. So it was this weird sort of culmination of all the things that I've...
These emotions.
Yeah, a lot of emotions of me being I grew up on platforming games and shooters, and I grew up playing Metroid and Metroidvania style games. And I've always been into music, and I was like, oh, all this kind of came together at the same time right here. And then my name popped up in the credits, and I was like, oh my God.
And
it was cool.
It works so well as well, because it was tough, right? Because your music is more like real music, more synth, like real instruments, not chiptune really at all. Whereas the game is chiptune.
Right.
So we love this tune. How do we use this? Because we want to use it. And it's amazing. We thought, well, let's put it in the ending, the very end of it, when there's that feeling of accomplishment where I'm done and now I'm drifting off back into space to do more fun stuff. And it works so well because it ends in, has that music going on where you beat it and do its thing. You jet off, and then boom, your music kicks in. It's just it feels good, right? You're like, oh, that's right. It just feels really good. The way it kind of comes in, and you just kind of, it's almost like a Milky Way, a little drift away in velvety space goodness. It feels really good when the music kicks in. It works perfectly.
Yeah, it was a fun thing to work on. I definitely want to do more stuff like that in the future. Cool. So
yeah,
very nice, very nice.
Yeah, that was nice the way it came together as well. It was very casual. Like, hey,
yeah,
we got this thing.
But had you guys met before, or
no? I don't think we'd met yet. Had we met before?
We hadn't prior to that.
I think we met at PAX afterwards.
Yeah, we met after that. Was it PAX or E3? We met after that. Yeah.
They all melt together.
They do.
Yes, right.
Yeah,
yes.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, awesome.
All right, Jools. So before I let you go, I have to ask, what is going on with Treasure Knots?
Well, we're working on it, which is good. I have it behind me, and that's no mistake.
Okay.
We like I said, we've kind of pushed it. We've had to put it on hold a number of times, just to get other projects done, to get it out in a nice, timely manner. But we've now partnered up with Nighthawk, which is a fairly new publisher, but full of guys that have been around forever from Majesco, and to work together and finishing up, which is great. So yeah, we're working on it right now. So now that Super Challenge is done, which is awesome, we are now focused on Treasure Knots, which is very exciting. We're finally back on that. Yeah.
And of course, you have a giant booth at E3 where you're going to demo this game.
Right, exactly.
Yeah. Are you coming to E3? Are you going to bring some stuff?
I don't think I will be able to, unfortunately.
Everybody's going
the
to
game
E3.
might be, but I don't think I'll be there, unfortunately. Okay. I think I'm actually going to go to Europe at that time. I'm going to Europe at some time in June. Is E3 in June?
It is.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, still.
I think I'll be on the other side of the ocean at that time, unfortunately.
Vacation?
Yes, thankfully.
All right. Well deserved then. Jools, thank you so much for joining us. For folks listening, you can pick up Mutant Mudds Super Challenge on the eShop right now. Make sure you check it out. Again, it's available with Cross-Buy. Jools, how else can people follow you on the internet?
I'm on Twitter. Jools Watsham is my Twitter name. I do stuff there. I've got a YouTube channel which you can also connect through my Twitter account. So that's the main thing on Twitter with Random Waffles.
Great.